Hey guys, Shyla Colt here, talking about my best and worst of 2017. I decided I was going to narrow it down to a list of 10. That was my 5 most disappointing reads and my 5 top reads, which made it incredibly hard, but I'm glad that I did that because it made me really think, because I did read quite a few books. I'm going to jump into it. I actually made a list with notes. So I'm going to start with the worst first because I want to end out my 2017 on a high note. So the first one that popped into my mind was The Graves by Eve Laurie. This was one of my most disappointing reads of 2017 because the cover was beautiful, the cover art inside the book was gorgeous, the concept was really interesting. I mean, even the tagline just really drew me in, but the book felt really short. It was disappointing. They just built it up and then let you down. Where the book ended was really where the plot should have sort of turned, and there should have been so much more after that. The characters were very one-dimensional. Yeah, it's almost frustrating me even trying to talk about it, but I was really disappointed because I expected so much more than I got. The next book was Before She Ignites by Jodi Meadows. I was super excited because there was a person of color on the cover, 1, so I was definitely going to read it and support it. And 2, it just sounded interesting. I mean, you have illegal dragon smugglers in a fantasy world. You have a lead character who has an anxiety issue. I mean, ping, ping, ping. It sounds like an interesting read, but I ended up not even able to finish the book because it was so drawn out. There were some issues with the way that the book jumped from past to present willy-nilly. And I say willy-nilly because as it jumped from past to present, there was no rhyme or reason. There was no pertinent information I felt that was really being delivered, and it was really more jarring than anything else. It made the read seem very choppy. They really stretched the part out so far that you stopped caring about what was going to happen next. There was a lot of potential here. It had good bones, but the execution was poor. And so I was super disappointed because I thought it was probably going to be one of my top reads of 2017, and it did not even come close. The next book was Given to the Sea by Mindy McGinnis. Again, good bones, interesting world, fairly interesting characters, but the handling of those characters, the lack of growth and development, the lack of explanation to me for some of the decisions that they were making kind of killed it. Also, they had this whole issue with one character being like the shining light that everybody else wanted and the other character being discarded, and it just kind of got under my skin. So again, a book that I thought was going to be one of my top reads of 2017 just felt really flat for me. Roar by Cora. I felt like the book ended where it should have started. I will read another from her, but I anticipated it being this epic fantasy tale, and it was really more of a romance story centered in a fantasy world. So my expectations versus reality kind of messed with me on this one, and that's why I think I ended up disappointed. Now, if I went into it knowing that it was a romance and not anticipating so much more fantasy than I actually got, I think I would have been okay with that one. But I did like the character growth, and I did like the world, and she had some very unique and interesting things going on. I will continue with that series, but it wasn't the read that I anticipated it being. My last one was Hunted by Megan Spooner. It was super hyped up, and when I read it, I was just disappointed. I felt like there were like decisions that were just stupid for the sake of being stupid. I felt like if this was a horror movie, she might have been classified as a too stupid to live type of character, which I just can't get behind. It just didn't strike the same chord for me that it seemed to strike for everyone else on the known planet. So that was one of my top disappointing reads. And now let's move into the happiness. Let's talk about my top 5 reads. These were really difficult for me because some of these were almost more series based than they were just one book. So I had to find which book in the series I liked a little bit more than the other one, but it was more of just a discovery of this world that I wanted to learn more about. Like my first pick, which was Murder of Crows by Anne Bishop. which is a part of the other series, which I fell in love with. I'd never read Anne Bishop before. This definitely won't be my last time, and I am trying to continue all the books in the other series. It's just a very interesting way to write a world with shapeshifters and vampires and wares that are being presented in a light that I have never seen. I like the flow of her work. Very, very impressed with Anne Bishop. Another of my top reads was Under Rose Tainted Sky by Louise Gornall. It was a very interesting story, unlike anything I had really ever read, because I had never read somebody that had anxiety and agoraphobia like this girl had, and understanding her process and what she had to go with, and then adding a romantic aspect to that heightened it. But she didn't make it the center. It was just another thing that was going on in the main character's world. I highly recommend everyone read it if they haven't had a chance. It blew my mind. And I read it at the beginning, more towards the beginning of 2017, and even at the end, it was still one of my top reads. My third top read was Now I Rise by Kierston White. Though, I'm going to be honest and say that whole series was standout for me. This edged out the first book, I think maybe just a little bit more, but I am completely enchanted by this world that she has created, where it's based in history, but she's taking these characters and putting them in the place of the actual historical people. Basically, Vlad Tepes, if it was a woman. It's amazing. If you haven't read it, you like historical, I highly suggest you pick it up. If you don't like historical, it's still a great book to try, because it might change your mind, because there's something very engaging about the way that Kierston White has written this, and I cannot wait for the follow-up to come in 28. It is one of my most anticipated, and it is the end of the trilogy. Next book, Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I had never read Leigh Bardugo, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. This cast of characters worked really well together. You have a magical heist, you have gangs, you have like this new world almost set in London. Incredibly interesting. It is on the dark side, but it's not overly dark, I don't think. The way that she writes it makes it more palatable. So, if you haven't read Leigh Bardugo, this is a fantastic place to start. One of my top reads. Last but not least, A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. Again, it was really difficult to pick this one, but this was my favorite of the series, but it was more of a series read for me that stood out over everything that I read. I really enjoyed this. It was my introduction to Sarah J. Maas. Well, A Court of Thorns and Roses, which was the first book in the series. But this series was my introduction to her as an author. I liked it. I liked her world. I liked her characters. There were some missteps that I wish that she hadn't done that took away from the series and took away from some of the books, but it didn't ruin everything else that I liked about it. To me, A Court of Mist and Fury was really the standout. It was this perfect balance of character growth, world growth, twist, plot turns. I loved it. I actually loved it more than the third, which was surprising, but then again, I hear a lot of people say that. I look forward to reading a little bit more from Sarah J. Maas and seeing how I feel about her as a writer, because a lot of people are really conflicted about her. And since this has been my only exposure, I'm going to dig deeper in 2018 because I want to see where I stand with it. What were your best and worst reads of 2018? Comment below and let me know. Again, if you like my brand of crazy and odd, go ahead and subscribe by clicking the bell below, and it will alert you anytime I post a video. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.